Hello. This is the second of a short series of videos I'm making about how predictions of doom don't usually pan out the way they are supposed to, at least according to the scientists or various experts who are so sure of themselves in these matters. And this time I'm going to talk about the Great Horse Manure Crisis of 1894. And I'm not referring to the fact that people were growing a lot of roses at that point. Okay, before I carry on, I'll tell you, I'm Granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. I'm also on Twitter and Gab. That's where I let you know when I've uploaded a new video. Please like this video, please share it, please subscribe. The dog is snoring next to me. Don't worry about that, he's quite safe. And yeah, what else was I saying? Yeah, subscribe. Yes, all the links are in the description, including links to donation sites if you wish to use any of them. That's it, I think. Yeah, just remember, click that like button. All right, well, let's talk about horse manure, should we? By the late 1800s, large cities all around the world were drowning in horse manure. Yep, that's it. The carbon pollution of the 19th century. Excuse me. Oh, it's cold now. In order for these cities to function, they were dependent on thousands of horses for the transport of both people and goods. Well, if we're talking about around the world, it would be more like millions of horses. But let's stick to London. In 1900, there were over 11,000 hansom cabs on the streets of London alone. There were also several thousand horse-drawn buses, each needing 12 horses per day, making a staggering total of over 50,000 horses transporting people around the city each day. And then, of course, there were, as they point out, horse-drawn carts and drays delivering goods. And there were farmers' carts coming in, bringing stuff from the country. So it wasn't just the local hauliers who were there, but it was people coming from outside. And this huge number of horses, it says here, created major problems. So, okay, the large amount of manure left behind on the streets. Some of you will have will know about Dickens' mention of crossing sweepers. They were young men, usually, who swept the crossings where people wanted to get from one side of the road to the other, so at least they could walk along without standing in a lot of horse poo. They had to be employed in Dickens' time. That was in the, well, most of his novels were set sometime around the usually somewhere between the 1830s. Well, actually, the Pickwick Papers were much earlier. But okay, most of Dickens' stuff was set around the 1830s to around the 1860s. It seemed to be sort of that time. And so that's even earlier than 1894, isn't it? So these horses created major problems. So there's not only manure. It says here, on average, a horse will produce between 15 and 35 pounds of manure per day. But it was also the number of dead horses, because horses will work very hard and they often drop dead in the traces, but even if they just dropped dead in the stables, they still had to be removed. Okay, horses also produced around 2 pints of urine per day. Oh, my horse gets rid of more than that. And it says here the average life expectancy for a working horse was only around 3 years. It wasn't that the horse itself was had a short life, but it would get arthritis from plodding the streets, so it would be put down because it became too painful for the horse to move. And in those days they didn't have the sort of medications that could retard the development of an arthritic condition. And so it said horse carcasses had to be removed from the streets. The bodies were often left to putrefy, so the corpses would be more easily sawn into pieces for removal. This is all pretty terrible stuff, isn't it? And it says here this wasn't just a British crisis. New York had a population of 100,000 horses, producing around 2.5 million pounds of manure a day. If you think pollution is bad now, just think of that. In 1894, the Times newspaper predicted, so here is the expert, in 50 years, every street in London will be buried under 9 feet of manure. So can you imagine the parades and the people stopping sporting events and concerts, throwing confetti around and orange powder in 1894, shouting, "Just stop horses." Because that's what they would have been doing if they were as mad as the Just Stop Oilers are now. And it became known, and so when this Times newspaper article predicted doom and gloom and strangulation, this became known as the Great Horse Manure Crisis of 1894. And in 1898, the world's first international urban planning conference in New York could find no solution to the Great Horse Manure Crisis. And then what happened? In 1898, cars were being produced. By 1912, the problem had completely gone. First of all, Henry Ford had come up with a process of building motor cars at affordable prices, and then there were electric trams and motor buses on the streets. Within the next 5 years, and by 1912, everything had been resolved. There were very few horses on the streets anymore, and motorised vehicles were causing all sorts of pollution with petrol. Not. So you can draw from that whatever conclusions you may wish to. But whenever you get these Just Stop Oil people who are talking about stopping people from doing things or even from living, because basically that's where their policies would go, stopping people from living because of the great oil crisis. Just remember the horse manure crisis of 1898 and, 1894. And while we're at it, I'm going to make another video about something that is just appearing on the horizon right now, and it's not electric cars. Okay, till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.